Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Pisano from FiberLink Communications. Thank you for attending our 34th webinar in the More Webinar series. So thank you for spending some time with us. Today, we're going to be talking about some things that are key to know about managing mobile devices with Exchange via Exchange ActiveSync. And we've got Val Hetrick, who's our Director of Customer Engineering, to present today. So she's hosted many of our More webinars, and one of the, frankly, one of, if not the most knowledgeable person about MAS 360 on the planet. So I think we've got a real expert here today. Quickly up front, we're going to cover the material pretty quickly, maybe 30 to 35 minutes. We'll do a short demo and kind of show you how MAS 360 covers some of the topics that we're going to talk about during the slide portion of this. And then Val and I will take Q&A through the chat window or the Q&A window. We're also going to do a couple of polls during the webinar, so get a chance to get your feedback, and we'll share the results with you there. And kind of finally, the slides will be available, and right after the webinar, you'll get an email with a link to the slides, and tomorrow I think we'll have the recorded version of the webinar up there as well. So thanks for attending. Val, thanks for presenting. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Joe indicated, in our webinar today, we're going to talk about some things that you can do within your Exchange environment to help manage your iPhones, your iPads, and your Androids, as well as some of the things that you should be aware of. If you're just starting to think about allowing devices to connect to Exchange, or if you've already opened Pandora's box and need to get more control, we think you'll find a few nuggets of information here that will help you. So let's set the stage and define the context for our discussion today. If you are like the vast majority of companies these days, you have users with corporate or personal provided iPhones, iPads, or Android devices, and it's likely that you fall into one of three categories. The first category is that you have Exchange ActiveSync locked down, but you are getting a lot of requests from users for access for their devices. The second is that you've opened up ActiveSync for a select few users, and they leak the information out to other users, so now you have a bunch of devices that are connected to your Exchange environment that you didn't intend to have connected. And the third category is that you are cautiously enabling access to Exchange ActiveSync by using mailbox policies. Whatever the situation is, based on your attendance here, you are actively looking for tools or techniques and tips that can help get some basic level of control over these devices. There may also be a real sense of urgency as smart device security starts to become more and more important in your environment. If you're like most customers that we talk to on a daily basis, you're used to your BlackBerry Enterprise server, which provided you comfort and confidence for the BlackBerry deployment, and you want to ensure that you have some of the same benefits for insecurity when managing these other devices. And with that, we're going to launch into our first poll. Joe?
Yeah, so I'm going to open the poll up here. Folks, if you could give us your feedback, that would be great. What we're interested in is how do you currently enable your mobile devices to access Exchange through ActiveSync. So we know lots of folks are using it. We'd love to know how you've got it set up in your company, and we'll display the results in a minute.
Great. So before we talk about turning some of the knobs and making some changes in your environment, we did want to look at the different things that can be done today with Exchange for managing your iPads, iPhones, and Android devices. You can't manage what you can't see is one of our taglines here at MAS 360. And Exchange offers you a few useful visibility attributes, around 10 or so, that can help identify the device type and help understand when that device was connected. You can also create different ActiveSync policies and assign them to ActiveSync-enabled mailboxes using your Exchange management interface. As you can see from the screenshots here, the user experience is what I would call adequate and not elegant. More importantly, you can take some actions on the ActiveSync connected devices, including the ability to change your mailbox policy, remove or block a device, and perform a remote wipe. keeping in mind that the remote wipe command issued by an Exchange administrator is a full wipe and will cause the iPad, iPhone, or Android to revert back to its factory settings. This is not generally a pleasant user experience, especially if the user has not backed up their personal data. Not completely relevant to this conversation, but worth mentioning, is that you can also manage some legacy devices like Symbian and Windows Mobile through Exchange if that is a requirement.
Val, so we displayed the results, and I think they're kind of interesting. So about a third of the folks on the webinar have ActiveSync open, which is great. About 45%, however, have it closed, and the administrator manually enables the partnership, which, I think for those of you who do it for a living know it is not the easiest thing in the world to do via Exchange. About 4% use the auto quarantine feature in 2010, which is certainly a best practice. A few fearless folks have written some PowerShell scripts, and then 15% don't allow any access at all. So it's great that the majority of folks are figuring out how to enable mobile devices through Exchange ActiveSync. That 45% that are doing it manually, I think there's some good information in this webinar, at least, that Val will be able to share with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So enabling Exchange ActiveSync access is fairly easy on your Exchange environment, and we think that it may be a little too easy, which you've proved a little bit from your poll answers here in terms of keeping ActiveSync closed down. And this is an area where you really do want to put some thought into how you want to enable this access and understand what the ramifications of the different approaches are. In 2007 Exchange, ActiveSync is on by default. This is the easiest approach and will be popular with your users, but you will have no control over who or what connects to your server. This may be an area where some additional thought is required. If you want to be a little more cautious, you can enable access one mailbox at a time. More control equals more work, unfortunately, but keeping in mind, even if you enable access at a mailbox level, the user is still able to connect as many devices as they want in that environment. This does come to a surprise for many. In either case, we would recommend that you periodically monitor who is connected, what devices to your server. And we'll talk about some of the reasons behind that in just a moment. So now that you've turned on ActiveSync in your environment and you become very popular with your users, there's a few things to keep in mind. To start with, there's not a clean way of getting an idea of connected devices in real time. In fact, this is where you may want to brush up upon your PowerShell scripting skills, which some of you have done so far. Other than writing a script, there's really no good way of getting a comprehensive device list out of your Exchange server. As mentioned before, if you want to provide more granular control over mailbox access, you will have to use the individual mailbox configuration. I will mention that for the handful of you that have made the move to Exchange 2010, the new ABQ, or Allow Block Quarantine list, is generally a big help. You may want to look into that if you are using Exchange 2010. We mentioned earlier that the Exchange Remote Wipe is all or nothing. Keeping in mind that when it comes time to wipe your boss's old iPhone 3GS, now that she has a shiny new iPhone 4, you should double check to make sure all the data is off. As if you do issue that wipe from Exchange, everything will be gone, including personal pictures or music. In order to get a good handle on reporting and to do some of the tasks that are not easily accomplished in the Exchange user interface, you may also have to do some script development. We do have a handful of customers who have learned PowerShell and have done that to help identify the devices in their environment.
Hey, Val, if I can add, we've also got a free tool that we make available on our website. If you go to maz360.com, go to our free tools section. We've got a PowerShell, a tool built around PowerShell that will give you a nice, easy way to find all the mailboxes that have device partnerships in your Exchange server. So it's kind of a neat kind of thing to just make sure that things are the way you are. Normally when we work with people and they run it, they almost invariably get a surprise or shock at the number of mobile devices that are actually connected to their Exchange environment if they've got ActiveSync open and they aren't actively either approving them or have some kind of auto quarantine feature in place.
Absolutely. That is one of the things folks are taken aback on even during our implementations of our software when we pull the devices across from Exchange. Great. Well, another big challenge that you can run into when using Exchange is trying to figure out which devices are no longer active and removing these devices from the Exchange server. Policy assignment is cumbersome. If you want to have your C-levels in a different policy than the default, you need to figure out which devices they have and manually assign that policy to them. And then also keep a lookout for any new devices they may connect to the environment. One critical organizational aspect is if you have multiple administrators taking actions on devices. There is no easy way to see the actions for a specific device or to obtain an audit history of these actions on these devices. Also on that topic, the only team members in your organization that can execute actions and view devices are the IT team members with access to your Exchange environment, which is normally a small group. What if you need to wipe a device and you can't get a hold of your Exchange administration? This really isn't scalable in an environment. On the business intelligence front, you only have the information that Exchange holds for a device, and there's no way to assign additional attributes like ownership, owner, or department.
So we're going to do our second poll now, and obviously Exchange ActiveSync's fine. It does very well for what it does, but the reality is it's really a messaging platform with some basic MDM capabilities grafted onto it, and Microsoft certainly continues to build those out. But what we're interested in this poll, and I'm going to open it up right now, is getting your opinion or feedback on the types of features that you wish you could take on or get access to through Exchange ActiveSync that you can't today.
Great, thanks, Joe. So we just covered some of the gaps to consider, and we also wanted to cover some of the traps that could get you tripped up down the road. The big one is even if you are controlling access at a mailbox level, once it's enabled for that mailbox, multiple devices can be connected. So we mentioned this one before, but if you allow an executive access for his iPhone, thinking that the iPhone is secure, but then he goes out and buys an Android tablet that may not be encrypted and connects without notifying anybody, you have exposure that you didn't bargain for. It is also very difficult to control what can be connected. If you do have jailbroken phones, rooted Androids, or old iPhone versions on 3.x that do not have particular types of robust encryption, you can't prevent them from connecting in your environment. One other thing to be aware of is that Androids may lie, claiming that they can enforce some of the ActiveSync policies, but we've found in the real world that they're not able to. There are actually Android apps that are specifically targeted at faking out ActiveSync. ActiveSync policies were created to leverage capabilities of Windows Mobile 5 and Mobile 6. They include a comprehensive set of policies that can achieve a very secure mobile device posture. The issue that you'll face today is that Apple and Google have implemented a small subset of the ActiveSync policy capabilities. It's really only a best effort and basically the minimum required to even be considered for an enterprise solution. There are some critical gaps in the ActiveSync policies, including the ability to apply device and application restrictions, or the ability to configure that device over the air. If you take a look at the Master Center, we do have a couple useful links that detail information on ActiveSync policy support for iPhones, iPads, and Androids across the various Exchange versions. Here's a list of some of the supported Exchange ActiveSync policies. As you can see, support varies greatly depending on the type of device and the version of software on that device. For example, you are able to enforce a password on iPads, iPhones, and Androids, including the strength and inactivity time before the device locks. With Exchange 2007 and 2010, you can also have more complex password settings, including password expiration and password history on the iPhone and iPad and on the later versions of the Androids. You can also now allow or disallow the use of the camera on the iPad and iPhone, as well as require encryption before allowing the device a connection to the Exchange server. We have covered what the native Exchange server tools can offer to manage your iPads, iPhones, and Androids, and we've also covered some of the gaps and traps that you could run into. For some, this may be fine, but for others, there may be a desire to supplement these capabilities. Let's talk about some things to consider as you try to decide whether or not you will stay with the Exchange management tools or whether to look at supplementing this with additional tools. It may be important to be able to block a device before it connects. This will require a device-level auto-quarantine capability. This functionality does not exist in all at 2007, although in 2010 was made available in the Exchange administration. You may need better device data and asset information or more consistent and reliable device data to make better decisions on what is accessing your corporate data. Do you want Android 1.6 devices connecting to your network? Do you want rooted Android devices connecting? Do you need to track devices based on department and ownership profile? These are all device lifecycle activities that Exchange does not help with. If you are starting to embrace personal devices, an important capability may be the need to selectively wipe devices. It may also be useful to simply send a lock command or reset password if a user has forgotten their passcode. Another useful action is the ability to locate the device if it's stolen. Another aspect that may be important is the ability to delegate all of the various functions in your organization. Do you allow your help desk staff to access your Exchange server? If you're like most of our customers, probably not. You may want the ability to allow your help desk person to send a lock or a passcode reset, but only a level 2 support person to send a wipe command. This is typically how companies work with the Exchange tools that do not facilitate. These requirements may not be an issue if you have relatively few devices, but it'll soon start to become a problem as you open up access. The more happy users you have, the more structured you will need to be to keep them happy. Consider how long you can get by with an Exchange management capability before you find a situation that cannot be accommodated.
We're going to jump into our third poll now. So I thought I'd first just kind of mention here kind of what seems to be interesting to folks based on poll 2 was really real-time information about the mobile devices and kind of audit trail and asset tracking. They certainly seem to be the things that people wish they had with Exchange ActiveSync and didn't. There's a couple things with Exchange that they're kind of minor things, but they really do kind of make you wonder how you're going to accomplish certain policy enforcement or policy compliance activities. So, for example, Val mentioned that the device information can be unreliable that Exchange ActiveSync reports, and I can give you like one very simple example because it happened to us when we were doing some testing. Apple had pushed out an iOS upgrade, and devices that had gotten the upgrade were still reporting the old iOS version that they had been on when the partnership was established with the mailbox. And so we kind of discovered without kind of really trying to, that the only way to get the device information to refresh itself was to literally break the partnership and reestablish it again. So obviously you're not going to want to do that with any kind of large number of things, but the problem is it becomes very difficult to have any policies around minimum OS version or OS version when you can't really rely on the information that you've got in there. So that's kind of one example of maybe a small issue, but could potentially be big in the wrong environment. The other one is really this kind of notion of mailbox level policy administration versus device level administration. And the reality is you assign a policy set to a mailbox in Exchange, and then any device that's paired to that mailbox has those policies applied to it. And obviously that could be more than one, right? So if somebody's got a couple of mobile devices these days, the obvious type would be they have a smartphone and a tablet. If they've got both of those devices paired to their corporate mailbox, then they're both going to be essentially under the control of the same set of policies. So that sounds maybe sensible, but until you start thinking about it, well, what happens if somebody's got a corporate provisioned smartphone but an employee-owned tablet, right? Typically what we see is companies would have completely different policies that govern the use of corporate-owned devices from employee-owned or employee-liable devices. Even on top of that, the devices may be on different platforms. Maybe it's, I don't know, an Android phone and an iPad. And so how do you craft a coherent set of policies that can be enforced when the devices are so different and their capabilities are so different? So these are some of kind of the real-world things that we run into with our customers that, frankly prompts them to look for, something that can help solve some of those problems. And the thing that helps there is device-level policy control. So with that, I'm going to open up our final poll. What we're asking is, we asked you a minute ago, what do you wish you had? Now we're going to ask you is, what would make you look for a third-party MDM solution that could solve some of these shortcomings that we've discussed with Exchange ActiveSync?
Great. So we did just cover quite a bit of information in the past 20 minutes or so, and hopefully you found that useful. And as Joe mentioned, we will post the slides up on the Master Center to allow you to view that a little bit more in detail. But as we start to consider all the new information about what the Exchange tools can do and what they cannot do, it may be useful to have a look at MAS 360, specifically around the ActiveSync Manager components, as well as the advanced iOS and Android management features. MAS 360 complements the Exchange ActiveSync capabilities to help the administrator and others deal with the mobile floodgates. MAS 360 adds a mobile device context to the Exchange management. Given that their current context is mailbox management, including device-level auto-quarantine for 2007 and 2010, and as well as Office 365. We're also providing an action history and an audit trail of who did what. MAS 360 is not meant to replace your ActiveSync environment, and you do not have to stop using ActiveSync. MAS 360 also doesn't change anything with the way that you use ActiveSync. It does provide full support for iOS 4.0 and above, as well as Android 2.2 and higher, leveraging the MDM APIs that Google and Apple have allowed MDM vendors to use. After a simple over-the-air enrollment workflow, your iPhone, iPad, or Android can be configured and secured over the air using the MAS 360 workflows. Some of the key help desk operations such as lock, wipe, selective wipe, and locate can also be performed. Here's a graphical view of how MAS 360 can complement Exchange management functions. It's a great way to solve the administrative challenges we have discussed that exist with Exchange and open the doors to greater possibilities by offering comprehensive management for your devices within the same management framework. Best of all, it's a cloud-based solution which requires no upfront cost or effort and can be turned up within minutes and is a subscription-based service that will show you value immediately.
And the thing I think that I like about our Exchange ActiveSync integration is it really kind of finds a nice balance between letting you continue to leverage and preserve the investment you've got in your Exchange environment, because we're certainly not replacing that, but we're kind of helping fill the gaps and strengthen the weak areas just based on the way Exchange ActiveSync actually manages mobile devices. So it's a really nice solution for companies that recognize that they need something more than Exchange ActiveSync, but are looking for something that's kind of a transition to a better, more fully featured MDM platform. And I think that's kind of one thing I like about our integration solution.
Great. Well, without further ado, I'm going to jump into the MAS 360 demo that we promised. Just give me 1 second to share out my application here. Great. So here you should be seeing the main entry page of MAS 360. And this particular environment has been configured to talk to an Exchange ActiveSync 2010 server, as well as allow your iOS and Android devices to enroll. The first thing you're looking at here is our watch list capabilities. And I wanted to call out a handful of the important items from an Exchange ActiveSync perspective. The first item are the number of devices that have not reported in the last 30 days. I would say from working with our customers, almost 95% of them have devices that are a year or even 2 years old in their environment. As users continue to replace phones, they do not sever that ActiveSync connection, and it remains active in the Exchange server. We also are able to show you devices that don't have any type of passcode protection enabled, and new devices that are pending approval. So we talked a lot about auto quarantine within the presentation, and I will show you where you can enable auto quarantine in our portal in a few minutes here. But first we want to take a look at some of the devices. So here we can see 2 newly devices are pending approval. Simply clicking on that watch list item will bring me into the 2 devices that are not yet approved in the system. And here you're able to see that we have an iOS 5 device and an iOS 4 device that have reported into the system via the over-the-air enrollment but have not been allowed ActiveSync connections. If I look at this particular iPhone, I can see here hardware and network and security overview information of this device. And the important part to look at is the mailbox approval status here. So you'll see right now this is a quarantine device. And in terms of it being quarantined, this user is not able to access any of their mail, contacts, or calendaring information on this device. As the administrator, I can go in and approve that device. So here you're seeing some of the ActiveSync actions that we have available. I could approve the device if I want to allow this person to access their mail. If I decide I didn't give this user permission, I can block him, which will prevent him from accessing that data. I can change the ActiveSync policy. Right now we can see he's in a default policy, and maybe I don't want the policy to just be default. Perhaps I want a passcode encrypted policy. I can change the policy here. Or I could remove this device from my Exchange server, which would then sever that connection. So already with MAS 360, just from clicking into one device, you have the view of all of your ActiveSync actions without jumping around in your Exchange console. And you're also seeing additional information about this device. If I click on the Exchange ActiveSync summary, under the summary location, I can see that this mailbox is activated, and I can see basic information about the device, including the agent, when it was last synced and activated, and what that mailbox state is. We're also able to see some of the additional iOS capabilities. So one of the things that we were discussing are the additional APIs that Apple and Google offer within their environment. And here we can see various actions. The selective wipe becomes one that folks are very interested in, as this allows you to only wipe the corporate data off of the device. So when you enroll over the air, we will push down your email profile or wireless or VPN information if you configure the policy to do so. And if that user left the company, you could issue a selective wipe, which would just remove the data that you pushed. You could then issue a remove control, which would then make that device unmanaged, so the user can easily leave your corporation with their personally owned device. You'll also see the information around location. You can send a message to the device. You could send a remote lock to the device. One of the more important help desk functions that we've seen customers are using a lot is the reset device passcode if a user forgets the passcode to log into their phone or their tablet device. We still do allow you to do a full wipe on the device in case it is lost. And then we track all of that information in our action history. So here I can look that we sent a message to this device and that it has a pending status. But you'll see where this can become quite useful if you do have a device that gets lost and you need to prove that it was wiped from an auditing perspective. Now that we took a look at the iOS device, I'm going to hop back to our results here. And I wanted to show you some of the additional reporting capabilities that we have from an Exchange perspective. So in our device groups, we have predefined global groups that are available for anybody. And we also have groups that you can create on your own. So just by browsing into the device groups here, I can get a list of all of my Exchange approved devices or my Exchange registered devices. So using this simple device group, I can get a list of everybody who has a connection to Exchange over the last 7 days, and I can easily adjust these reports to show me the last 30 days, the last 90 days, or all records that were ever created. So you'll see there we jumped a little bit to 12 records, and we can see the majority of the devices here are iPhones. We do have one Android within this environment here as well, 2 Androids actually. And when you look in at the Android level, you'll see the same information that you'll see in terms of the Exchange integration. So here we also have the Exchange ActiveSync information. We can show that it's approved and that that user is now actively receiving their mail. We may have a little bit more of an audit history on this particular device, but not so much. You can also create custom device groups. Within your custom device groups, you could track items such as devices that are quarantined, devices that are blocked, or devices that need to be approved. So now that we've showed you some of the various device information, I did want to show you some of your policy management. When you configure MAS 360 to talk to your Exchange ActiveSync environment, we will pull across any policies that you may have already defined. So here you can see in one window the mixture of the Exchange ActiveSync policies and the iOS policies. And if I make my list a little longer here, we will show the Android policies in here as well. So let's take a look at one of our Exchange policies. And here you'll see a much simpler layout of the client access policies that you're used to managing on your Exchange servers. Here you can set the device passcode if you wanted to enforce a passcode on the various devices. And you'll see this looks very similar to Exchange. You can set up your various sync configurations to do limit email size or attachment size. There's also some basic device restrictions. As I was indicating earlier, some of these features are not honored by all of the Android and iOS devices. I can tell you from experience the camera is one of those. Application restrictions are also high level in terms of your Windows devices. But here you can see you can easily make policy changes and then you could save and publish those. The next time that device checked in with your ActiveSync server, we would apply that policy.
I think, the thing here I think you can see pretty clearly, especially if you compare an Exchange, the things you can control via policy with Exchange ActiveSync versus what you can control in the Android or iOS world. It's just kind of how much richer it all is in the iOS and Android world. And obviously, you can certainly do some basic management of Android devices and iOS devices through Exchange, so the things Val just showed you. But the reality is there's a whole world of additional things you can and probably should be doing that you're just not going to be able to manage via Exchange ActiveSync. And I think that's kind of the thing we want to make sure you're left with and that you're aware of. So it's a great place to get started with MDM, Exchange ActiveSync. Everybody's got it. Everybody's got it turned on, maybe shouldn't. There's actually a kind of a step beyond that that's more advanced and gives you more capabilities, and certainly as mobile devices become more complex and capable, it's only a matter of time before you recognize that you need to move to that next level.
Thanks, Joe. You've actually tied in a little bit to our additional policies that we're going to show here. So what I've clicked into are your iOS MDM policies that we have available. So these are the policies that will sit on top of your ActiveSync policies. When you have an iOS or Android policy and an ActiveSync policy, the two will play together, and the most restrictive policy setting will win. So it will allow you to continue to support your Symbian and Win 7 and Win Mobile devices with their requirements, but you can also add the additional capabilities that iOS and Android allow you to do through their MDM APIs. So here you can see that we have not only an allowed idle time, but also a grace period for device lock. So some of the options are very different. In terms of device restrictions, using iOS, you can control additional options here that are not controllable from an Exchange perspective. If I wanted to prevent the user from installing iTunes applications or using the camera, I can simply uncheck the options. We also offer application compliance. With application compliance, you can configure restricted applications or allowed applications, as well as required applications. And to do that, you simply need the application name, as well as the bundle ID. The iOS and Android policies also allow you to configure wireless profiles, whether they're open or whether you want to use WPA, or if you are an enterprise shop and want to configure your enterprise information. We do also support certificates in this particular environment for wireless VPN and ActiveSync. For folks familiar with the iPhones and iOS devices, we do allow you to configure your Cisco and Juniper settings. The F5 information is coming. If you're a Novell GroupWise shop, you can also configure your IMAP connections within the policy management, or for the conversation we're having right now, you can configure your Exchange ActiveSync policies. And what this allows you to do is have a single enrollment for the end user without providing all the keys to the castle. So you would send the iOS device or Android device an enrollment request, and once the user is enrolled, they would be prompted to enter their Exchange credentials, and then we would set up the email. As Joe was alluding to earlier, we also have additional compliance rules that I'll show that will not allow users to route around this information. And you can take additional actions if they try to route around it, such as a wipe or a selective wipe. You'll see some of the additional iOS features down below. I'm not going to go through every one of them. They're mostly if you're not using Exchange integration. But like I said, we also do support the certificates, and you can also use the iOS policies to deploy a web clip down to the device.
Hey, Val, there was one question that came in that while you're kind of here in policies might be a good thing to cover. One of the attendees asked if we can push profiles down for touchdown, NitroDesk touchdown. Oh, absolutely. I will actually show that here in just a second. Let me find one of my Android policies. And we'll use this one labeled touchdown. So we, with Maz360, have an agent for the Android devices, and that agent is integrated directly with NitroDesk. Their product is Touchdown, which is a secure email container. We do not sell Touchdown, but we can help coordinate any efforts with them. It's one of the more popular email containers out there for Android. But essentially, we can prompt the user to install Touchdown on the device if it's not already there. We do integrate with Touchdown version 6.5 or higher. And you'll see we're able to provide the license key that you may have from the corporation. And you also would specify your Exchange server name and your SSL if you're using that, and then the type of Exchange account. So here we either allow you to prompt the user for credentials, or you can use the credentials from the enrollment request that you provide. We've actually just implemented some additional Touchdown security settings and other settings that Touchdown has released from an MDM API perspective. So here you could configure a second layer of passcode protection. You could also encrypt your emails or attachments, allow backups, disable copies, and then some of the other detail below that Exchange offers in terms of, your email size limits, your calendar options, email signatures, and if you're going to allow the user to change their email signature. Outside of the Exchange ActiveSync pieces within the Android, either direct or via Touchdown, you can also configure your passcode policy.
For devices that support encryption, you can enforce device encryption using the MAS 360 policies. You can also set various device restrictions. So if I didn't want to allow Bluetooth, I could simply disable that option here. The application compliance also exists. The one thing I will call out is the Androids haven't gotten as far along with VPN connections yet as iOS has, but some of the Motorola devices that have the EDM APIs will allow you to configure an IPsec tunnel.
Hey, just for a moment, so I just want to add my own editorial comment here on this week's big news with Google purchasing Motorola Mobility. We've been pretty active about integrating with Motorola's APIs because they frankly did offer some additional security features that the standard Google or standard Android distribution just didn't have. So we frankly view it as a very good thing in terms of bringing kind of order to the ecosystem chaos. Although Google's been getting it better for a while, but I think this will certainly make it more orderly and therefore better for enterprises and companies like us. I'm sure handset manufacturers have a little bit different view of it. And the other thing that I think is significant, I think at the Mobile World Congress showed earlier this year, Motorola announced that they had bought 3LM and were going to integrate their, frankly, pretty rich security APIs into the version of Android that they sent out with their Motorola devices. So I think that frankly that technology, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it shows up in a future version of Android. So I think that's all good for those of us who want to see Android get better and get better positioned as an enterprise platform, because right now it definitely lags Apple and certainly RIM in terms of a good corporate device.
Great, thanks, Joe. All right, well, the one additional item I wanted to show you, which goes hand in hand with policies, is something I believe is quite hot in some of the forums that I've been participating in anyway, is the ability to control certain devices from accessing your corporate data. So we mentioned a bit earlier around minimum OS version or jailbroken devices, and here with our compliance rules platform, if I only wanted to allow a particular version of Android to connect, and a particular version of iOS to connect, I could select that within here. And when that device comes across, if it doesn't meet this particular criteria, I could select to do something on it. A block, as you're seeing here, would block the device on the mail server for coming in. And I can choose to do that immediately, or I could set a particular number of hours or days, and I can add a comment in for the end user. Now, the end user will get an email with this information, as well as any administrator that you define in the notification recipients. One of the more important items that folks are concerned about with MDM today is that Apple and Google don't allow us to force our agents to stay on the devices. So here, if a device becomes unenrolled or unmanaged, you can take an action on that device. And this is the way that many of our customers are preventing their users from routing around the MDM solution to get into ActiveSync.
And folks, for those of you that are maybe evaluating, MDM technology right now, ask that question about what happens when the end user tries to uninstall your agent on their device. We've put a lot of effort into making sure that we can, at a minimum, put the device in a state where it can do no harm to your corporate resources, but not every technology is built with that capability. So that's kind of a key thing that happens because, frankly, the platforms themselves, meaning iOS and Android, don't give anyone any way to prevent an end user from uninstalling an app. They can uninstall whatever they want, whenever they want.
Some of the other compliance options you can enforce here are encryption support, application compliance, or jailbroken or rooted devices. We also have two monitoring rules, which don't generally trigger any type of action, but will monitor and alert and notify the users of any SIM change on the device or if they enter a roaming change. With that, there's two additional things that I would like to show you here, and one is our Cloud Extender device view. So the Cloud Extender is the software that facilitates the communication between us and your Exchange server. Here you'll see that we actually have this one configured to do Active Directory authentication, as well as Active Directory user visibility and communication to the BlackBerry Enterprise server. Right now we're just going to focus on the Exchange ActiveSync tab, but here you can see the version of my Exchange server when the Exchange communication last occurred to MAS 360, and that I have auto-quarantined enabled. And here's a list of the folks that are receiving email alerts when a new device does come into the system.
Hey Val, there was a question about could you demonstrate how auto-quarantine works. So I think this setting here is kind of, frankly, how we enable that through Exchange ActiveSync. And then for Android devices and iOS devices that we are managing via our agent, we've got the compliance rules that you showed a moment ago. You know, in 2010, there's actually a very well-architected way to do auto-quarantine we leveraged the ABQ list that Microsoft supported. In 2007, we developed, frankly, some proprietary techniques in integrating our Cloud Extender with Exchange 2007 that provides an auto-quarantine capability, meaning that devices that are trying to pair with a mailbox are blocked until an administrator approves them. Right.
And I will show you in policy how you can configure auto-quarantine as well as some of the additional detail here. You can also get a quick view of your Exchange server summary statistics. So here we're showing how many mailboxes are enabled, how many devices are synced, and how many mailboxes have more than one device synced. Now, if I wanted to turn off auto-quarantine, I could configure our Cloud Extender settings, which will bring us into the Cloud Extender policy. And here you can see that I'm currently enabled for my auto-quarantine. If I wanted to turn that off, I could simply check the box. It is off by default when you sign up for MAS 360 because we want you to be allowed to configure your own settings and make your own changes to your Exchange environment. On 2010, as Joe was mentioning, there is the ability to approve all of your existing devices. And this becomes important in our implementation from a 2007 perspective as well. So when you install the MAS 360 Cloud Extender to talk to your Exchange environment, when you enable auto-quarantine, we essentially look into every mailbox and gather a list of devices that are already there and add them to an approved list. Those devices are automatically grandfathered in as they already have existed on the Exchange server. From that point, on 2007, you can go and explicitly block anybody that you don't believe should have an ActiveSync connection. Now, on 2010, if you wanted to get strict, you could change the automatically approve all existing devices to no, which would then automatically block any device that's already ActiveSynced. So we haven't had anyone actually do that yet, but the capability is there if that's something that you wanted to change. One of the last pieces I was going to show you was our mobile device reporting. And our mobile device overview business intelligence reports are more consolidated reports. Up till now, we've been looking at some individual device levels. And here's where you can get into, some additional consolidated reports to show audit history to your executives or show them some pretty graphs here. So what we're looking at right now is an overview of the entire device population. And we can see the number of agent-managed devices versus BlackBerry versus ActiveSync. And this is the last 7 days here, so let me refresh this a little bit and we'll get a little bit more detailed information. But here what you're able to see are devices by ownership, devices by platform, devices by approval state. So this would give you an easy way to go in and unquarantine or approve devices. We can also see how many new devices are coming in per month. We can look to see how vastly deployed the ActiveSync policies are, get an idea of devices that support remote wipe, and then also have some high-level overviews in terms of the carrier information. Now, clicking on any one of these pieces of the pie will bring you into a more detailed list of that data that can be then exported and manipulated. but this will help you manage your environment a little bit, where you can click on that device name and get right to the device view. So here we're looking at device ownership with our platform, what it's managed by, the ownership, the approval state, your email client device ID, and when the device was last reported. You'll see some of the additional detail. From an ActiveSync policy perspective, we can show which users are in which ActiveSync policy. And right now, everybody's in our default policy, but if you had, an executive policy or an IT policy that you wanted to ensure users were in, you can easily look at that here. And we're actually just looking at the quarantine state, so I'm going to change my filter quickly and see if that makes a little bit of a difference here, just to show you some of the additional policies. We also have very detailed iOS hardware overview, software overview, as well as BlackBerry and Android. If I wanted to get an idea of my iOS software that's out there, I can quickly go in and see that I have 5 people who have Pandora installed in their environment. And this is where you could leverage the information to start blocking applications or requiring applications to be on the devices. And this is the bundle ID that I've been referring to in terms of some of our policy. You can also drill into more of the hardware information. So here we're going to see a few graphs about our Android environment. And here we can see that of the 3 devices, we have 3 HTCs. We have a couple on Android 2.3, one on Android 2.2, and then again we're showing the carrier information. So that's kind of your 10,000-foot overview of MAZ 360 in terms of ActiveSync and how you can leverage your existing environments to pull that detail into the MAZ for easy viewing and management, and also layering on some of the iOS and Android capabilities.
Val, thanks. That was great. One thing that's an account in our production MAZ 360 portal. So it's not a demo environment or a canned environment in any way. I mean, it's a live working environment along with the thousands of other environments our customers have in the platform right now. So Val and I tried to handle the ones that were sensible, the questions we got while we were in the demo, but some more have come in, and I'm going to kind of throw them out here, and Val and I will try to handle them. This part of it's always fun. Question, can syncing to personal devices be limited to calendar and contacts only while prohibiting email?
So today, when we set up the ActiveSync connection, we will configure all of the pieces, but that is an interesting question that I can ensure our product team has access into.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thought. I mean, I know we don't do it today. Another question about whether we support DataViz RoadSync, which is another Exchange push email client. So, I mean, I think the answer is we don't have any specific integration targeted to it like we do with Touchdown. Obviously, we've got a partnership with NitroDesk. They're kind of the kind of gold standard for collaboration apps in the Android world, because the apps that kind of come natively with Android aren't so hot, so people coming off of Blackberries and going to Android quickly get disappointed and want something like Touchdown installed. So it's kind of the de facto standard there, which is why we integrate with it. If RoadSync's got enough demand, we would certainly do something special. However, all the Exchange ActiveSync capabilities are certainly there just by the fact that we both can support the ActiveSync protocol. So we can support it as well as any other ActiveSync-enabled server can. Another question, can MAZ 360 replace a BES server, or does it work with the BES server?
Sure. So today we do integrate with the existing BlackBerry APIs that would exist on your BlackBerry Enterprise server. The Cloud Extender is required to talk to that URL, and then that data is passed back to MAZ 360. We have had instances where customers have leveraged us to do that, to track migration off of their BlackBerry as their users move on to the various smart devices that are out there. But today we do require that BlackBerry Enterprise server.
Another question, is this for Exchange or does it work with other mobile platforms?
So we do also interoperate with Traveler 8.5.1 or higher. if you are a Lotus Note shop. We are looking at some of the other platforms that are out there in terms of Google to be able to, interact with those folks as well. We did recently release support for Office 365, which has been somewhat popular as Microsoft forces people to move off of their BPOS environment and onto the 365 platform.
Yeah, so that Office 365 support we just released, about a month ago?
Right.
So yeah, we've got full support for that.
Yeah, and I believe by September of 2012, Microsoft will force everybody to move off of their BPOS environment and onto the Office 365 environment.
Okay, so there's no reason why you shouldn't start right now.
Right.
Another question, do you support Windows Phone 7?
We do support Windows Phone 7 through the ActiveSync Exchange information. As Microsoft continues to allow and put out their MDM capabilities, we will look to integrate with that from a more agent-based level, but that is a roadmap item.
Okay, great. Can Mass 360 deploy corporate apps and or provide a corporate app store?
Absolutely. So we do have our application catalog, which can be enabled. It's an over-the-air download to your iOS or Android device. And within that application catalog, you can distribute either iTunes or Marketplace applications through Maz 360, as well as the ability to deploy your own corporate applications. And that can be done at a device level, at a group level, or at an overall level.
Great. I'm going to throw this one out there, Val, although you may get angry at me. Is there anything related to OWA that folks need to be kind of concerned about or aware of as it relates to Maz 360?
I don't think there's really anything to be aware of. I can throw out a few things that we've encountered in terms of helping customers. Obviously, OWA and ActiveSync are separate protocols within a mailbox. One doesn't necessarily depend on the other. In order to use ActiveSync, you do obviously need to have your client access server on the internet somewhere, so we have had instances where corporations have only made that private in their network. Obviously, since these devices have internet access on them, if folks wanted to do OWA from their phone, they can. They would be self-contained within the Exchange Outlook Web Access app at that point. I think the other thing that folks look over sometimes as well is even as an end user on my laptop, I can log into Outlook Web Access and manage my own mobile device. And I think a lot of people don't realize that's there, which can help keep your environment a little bit cleaner, so where the end user can go in and sever that connection or even send a remote wipe.
Super. Hey, a couple folks asked about the free tool that I mentioned earlier for, providing a list of the partnered devices.
Right.
If you go to maz360.com, which is our corporate website, you'll see a link for tools and trials. If you click there, you'll scroll down to the bottom. You'll see a set of tools, and the tool you're looking for is called the Maz 360 ActiveSync Reporting Tool. So it's really a PowerShell script with a little, executable wrapped around it. So if you want to give it a shot, go ahead. You might learn something, or you might get scared. Not sure which. Couple of other questions. How do you differentiate in your reporting between employee-owned and corporate-owned devices?
Sure. So that's an attribute that you would define on the device upon approval. So when you do have auto-quarantine enabled and that device synchronizes in, once you approve it, you're forced to select whether that's a corporate-owned or employee-owned device. If you haven't specified that, we can also export the data out of the system and re-import it with that detail there.
Super. Next question, one near and dear to my heart. Do you provide free trial? And the answer is absolutely. And when we end this webinar, your browser is going to get redirected to a page where you can sign up yourself and provision an account in Maz 360, just like the one you saw Val demonstrate out of. It takes about 5 minutes. In order to manage Exchange, in order to integrate with your Exchange environment, there's a small piece of software called the Maz 360 Cloud Extender that needs to be installed and set up. It's pretty simple. It's pretty fast. Typically, it takes 15 minutes or so. I don't know how many thousands of those have you been through by now, Val?
Quite a few. There's a few small requirements that you set on your side and install the Cloud Extender, and then you're off and running.
and I think the other question, the second part of that question is, if we try it, are there any issues reverting back to Exchange ActiveSync? Well, first thing I'd say is if you try it, you'll never want to revert back. But that's just me. But what's the real answer, Val?
The answer is yes. We would work with you to ensure that if you enabled auto quarantine during your evaluation, that we would get that shut off for you. And put everything back to the exact state. The cloud extender, since it is just a piece of software, can be removed like any other piece of software and put you right back to normal.
Yeah, so the one thing I can say without any kind of worry here is that there's no doubt that MAS 360 is the simplest MDM platform to deploy and set up in the entire marketplace. I mean, I work with all of our partners. I talk to customers every day. Val talks to customers every day. People are amazed at how quick and simple and easy it is to get provisioned, configure your environment, and be up and running and managing devices. And I mean, every day we get people up and running and managing devices in 15 to 20 minutes. So it's really that simple, really that quick. It's going to take weeks, if not months, with others. And, I would really encourage you, even if you're, not sure right now, take the trial and learn, right? I mean, if you don't know a lot about MDM and you'd like to learn more, take the trial and find out. Learn on us. So we'd love that. A couple more questions here. We're getting close to the end. If, folks want to hang around, that's fine. Hang on a second. If you have a BES security policy and it conflicts with another policy, which applies?
So the BES policy will be applied to your BlackBerry Enterprise server devices or your BlackBerry devices themselves, whereas the ActiveSync policy is in conjunction with iOS or Android. The most restrictive policy option will win.
There's another question around personal devices. Can MAS distinguish between corporate and personal info and manage both? I think the answer is yes, and that's the whole purpose of a selective wipe.
Correct.
Right. So a selective wipe, as opposed to a full wipe. A full wipe is just what it sounds like. It wipes everything, corporate and personal information, applications, everything. A selective wipe will only wipe the information that MAS 360 is specifically managing, which would be the corporate information, corporate email settings, corporate VPN, corporate Wi-Fi settings. So I'm going to throw this one out there, Val. Here's another one for you. Our users access OWA and ActiveSync via a TMG gateway in our DMZ. I assume this is supported.
Provided the DMZ has a public accessible ActiveSync address, absolutely. We can configure that detail and deploy those settings.
Yeah, so we're pretty network neutral, and that's part of this whole easy to deploy, easy to try thing. So folks, we've had a lot of folks stay on for the extra time. I appreciate that. Okay, here's one more. How's MAS 360 licensed? So it's really simple. It's per device per month. So, there are no other charges. There's no activation fees, no maintenance fees, no support fees. It's strictly per device per month, pay as you go. So it's as simple to buy as it is to try. One last thing, a couple things here, and then I'll wrap up. And remember, your browser is going to get redirected to sign up for our free trial that we've been encouraging you to do. In 2 weeks, September 1st, our next More webinar will be an upgrade or refresh of best practices for enabling Android devices in the enterprise. So if you're kind of one of these companies that's on the sidelines about Android and you aren't sure and you've heard it's a mess but you think you want to find out more, the good news is there are ways to allow Android devices in, and there are safe ways, and we're going to tell you about what those are. So if you've got 30 minutes to an hour to spend, please join us for that. All of our past webinars are recorded at our Master Center, so the URL's there, masters.maz360.com. We did a webinar with NitroDesk to talk about our touchdown integration, so that's up there. We did a webinar about our Notes Traveler integration, that's up there. We did a webinar about our BlackBerry Enterprise integration, that's up there. So all the things that folks have asked about during the Q&A today, there's a full webinar recorded up there about it. So I would encourage you to go up to the Master Center. You'll find all those recorded webinars, plus lots of other great content from people at FiberLink, people in the industry. So I can't encourage you enough to go try it. The URL is masters, that's with 2 A's, .maz360.com. So Val, thanks for your time today. Thanks for taking on all this Q&A. I know it can you're never quite sure what you're going to get next. Folks, thanks for all the engagement. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for your time. Still have a lot of folks on. I appreciate your patience since we went a few minutes over. Thanks again, and see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you.